Hey everybody, Graham here. This is the first part of my series in which I read Dianetics and tell you about it so that you don't have to read it. I'm going to be starting today with the opening of the book, which is the Synopsis. And in the Synopsis, Hubbard lays out the basic this and that of Dianetics. I touched in yesterday's video on the difference between Dianetics and Scientology, and I'll tell you a little bit about why this is the case. So, as I said yesterday, the difference between Dianetics and Scientology is that Dianetics is a method, whereas Scientology is belief system or something. It is the area in which Dianetics is applied to. Dianetics came before Scientology, and at the time, it was developed in the 1940s, and the book Dianetics was published in 1950. And at this time, in the post-war era, after World War II, there was a lot of faith in the idea of progress, scientific progress, societal progress, and stuff like that. And Hubbard was interested in the field of psychology and psychiatry. He had his own mental problems, he believed, and he was looking for a way to fix these. And he came upon a bunch of ideas that he kind of organized, synthesized, and changed a little bit into Dianetics, but he stole ideas from a lot of different places. So the basic theory of Dianetics goes like this, at least as laid out in the Synopsis. Until the discovery of Dianetics, the mind has been misunderstood. Freud believed that there was a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. And Hubbard said that the unconscious mind is actually very badly named, because even though you're not conscious of it in the sense that you're not aware of it, the unconscious mind, which he renamed the reactive mind, is actually always conscious. Your reactive mind is always awake, always listening, always processing information. So even stuff that happens when you're unconscious, asleep, not paying attention, whatever, all of that stuff is still being recorded by your reactive mind. Your analytical mind, which is his term for the conscious mind, is not aware of this stuff. So, as you go through life, your reactive mind, which is always aware, picks up memories specifically of things that are painful, either physically painful or emotionally painful or mentally troubling. Your reactive mind picks this up, and these memories are stored in what he referred to as engrams. So these engrams are little sort of memory nuggets that are part of your reactive mind, and they remember pain. And psychological problems, and he believed physical problems, because he believed that physical problems, physical illness was primarily psychosomatic. And in this respect, honestly, he's not all that different from the Christian Science religion, who believe that all physical illness is the result of spiritual defect. But anyway, to get back to Hubbard. So now as you go through life, something might happen that triggers an engram. So, for example, if you, for some reason, had a problem breathing at one point, this would be encoded as an engram. And then later on, if somebody were to say something like, I can't breathe, this engram would be triggered and you might, say, develop asthma. So what Hubbard believed was that you could get rid of these engrams. And the way you got rid of engrams was in a process called auditing. And what happens in auditing is that you sit down with someone else, at least in the earlier stages. My understanding is that in the later stages of Scientology, you can audit yourself. But that's not how Dianetics was conceived originally. But the idea was that you would sit down with somebody else and they would ask you questions. And the questions were designed to get you to recall these painful events that have become encoded as engrams. So you would go through a bunch of questions and, you would really sort of try to clear your mind and just sort of focus and find that locus of bad memory. And then what you would do is sort of explore that, go through it, and in that way you would get rid of it. And the idea is that you're supposed to do this with all of your engrams, and when you do, you will clear your reactive mind and essentially eliminate it because you've gotten rid of all the engrams. So your reactive mind may still be there, but it's now clear and it's not impeding you anymore. A few years later, Hubbard would discover an instrument called the electropsychometer, which became known in Scientology as an e-meter. The e-meter consists of a little unit with a needle on it and some sensitivity controls and a couple of electrodes that you hold in your hands that Scientologists refer to as cans. So you hold on to these, and what this does is it measures the electrical resistance of your body. It passes a small current through your body and calculates the voltage drop and the resistance from that. Hubbard believed that if you were using an e-meter and something that the auditor said triggered an engram, that this would show up on the e-meter, that it would change the resistance of your body, and that would help you to locate these engrams. Now, I'll say that auditing, apart from the e-meter thing, auditing doesn't sound all that different from sort of normal psychotherapy, where you will, you talk to a therapist and you sort of go through past trauma and, try to come to terms with it. So in that sense, it's not all that different. But the language that he put around it and the use of the e-meter really turned it into something that was sort of different from what sort of standard psychological and psychiatric practitioners were doing. So this is the essence of Dianetics. Now, one of the things that Hubbard kind of emphasized in Dianetics is that these engrams were being formed before you were born, that things that happened in the womb could cause trauma, and those would also exist as engrams. So part of the auditing is actually going back into your prenatal state. And in Scientology, this would extend to past lives as well. So that's one of the big differences between Dianetics and what came later in Scientology, is that he sort of extended this idea of prenatal trauma to past life trauma. But getting back to Dianetics itself. So that's basically it. So the idea is that you would do this and that you would clear your reactive mind, and when you become clear, you will recover any abilities that you had that were being suppressed by your engrams. To sort of complicate this a little bit, he introduces the idea of dynamics. And in Dianetics, he talks about 4 dynamics. And those dynamics are all about survival. This is apparently something that came to him when he had a bad reaction to a drug that was being used during a dental procedure, probably nitrous oxide, I would think. But he suddenly got this flash that the overriding command in life is to survive. Now, I personally don't think that's any great revelation. The survival instinct is pretty basic, but this really hit him hard, and this sort of became the basis for what he thought. But then he kind of broadened this idea into 4 dynamics, and then later in Scientology he would expand them to 8 dynamics. But the 4 dynamics are, let's take a look at them. Dynamic 1, the urge of the individual to reach the highest potential of survival in terms of his self and his immediate symbiotes. So that's your basic survival. That's just, I need to survive. Dynamic 2, the urge of the individual to reach the highest potential of survival in terms of sex, the act, and creation of children and their rearing. So this is survival of the bloodline or the genotype. This is you, your family, your descendants. Dynamic 3, the urge of the individual to reach the highest potential of survival in terms of the group, whether civil, political, or racial, and the symbiotes of that group. So that is just what it says. Your survival instinct is to promote the survival of the group. And dynamic 4 is the urge of the individual to reach the highest potential of survival in terms of mankind and the symbiotes of mankind. So that's your global. So you start dynamic 1, the self, dynamic 2, the family, dynamic 3, the group, dynamic 4, humanity in general. Those are your 4 dynamics. And engrams suppress those dynamics, and in doing so, they are what cause you mental and physical distress. And Dianetics can cure that. That's basically the deal. That's the essence of Dianetics right there. And my assumption is that the rest of the book is going to give you the details on this. So, there it is. Now, before I wrap this up, I want to go through this synopsis and point out some of the things that Hubbard wrote that are the reason that this stuff fascinates me. So let's take another look at the text here. So straight away, we've got the very, very first sentence. The creation of Dianetics is a milestone for man, comparable to his discovery of fire and superior to his inventions of the wheel and arch. That is a pretty bold claim. What he has come up with is as significant as fire, and more significant than the wheel or the arch. I don't know how you begin to claim something like that, but he did. Moving on. We went through the dynamics. Here's where he talks about people who have cleared their reactive mind, which he referred to as clears, and are still called clears in Scientology now. The clear, the goal of Dianetic therapy, can be created from psychotic, neurotic, deranged, criminal, or normal people if they have organically sound nervous systems. Meaning that as long as there's nothing wrong with your brain or your nerves, Dianetics will work on you. So, some qualities of the clear. He has attained the full power and use of hitherto hidden abilities. So, you will gain abilities by going clear. Not sure what exactly these abilities are yet, but maybe we'll find out. The inhibition of one or more dynamics in an individual causes an aberrated condition, tends toward mental derangement and psychosomatic illness, and causes the individual to make irrational conclusions and act, still in an effort to survive, in destructive ways. So, when your dynamics are being inhibited, you're still trying to survive, but because those engrams are messing with the dynamics, your attempts at survival are going to be counterproductive. Dianetic techniques deletes, without drugs, hypnotism. Put a pin in hypnotism there for a second because we're going to come back to it. Surgery, shock, or other artificial means, the blocks from these various dynamics. The removal of these blocks permits the free flow of the various dynamics and, of course, results in heightened persistency in life and a much higher intelligence. So, if you become clear, you will become more intelligent. The source of aberration has been found to be a hitherto unsuspected submind. He's talking about the reactive mind here. Complete with its own recordings. Underlies what man understands to be his conscious mind. The concept of the unconscious mind is replaced in Dianetics by the discovery that the quote-unquote unconscious mind is the only mind which is always conscious. In Dianetics, this submind is called the reactive mind. Okay. So here's one of those statements that he throws in everywhere, but if you think about them, they're a little suspect. As Dianetics has discovered and can prove, I don't know that this is actually proven anywhere. A link to some source material would be helpful here. I thought this was an interesting statement. Aberration is caused by what has been done to, not done by, the individual. So the engrams that are recorded are bad things that are done to you, but they're not necessarily bad things that you do. So if I understand this correctly, he's saying that if you do something bad to another person, you'll give them engrams, but you yourself won't get engrams. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. That's just my interpretation based on this sentence. The engram, and only the engram, causes aberration and psychosomatic illness. Now remember that he thought that most illness was psychosomatic. So get rid of those engrams, you're going to get rid of all your illnesses. Exhaustive tests have demonstrated. Again, let's see the tests. Okay, so now we're coming back to where I told you to put a pin in the idea of hypnosis, because I think this part right here is a little telling. The technique of therapy is done in what is called a Dianetic reverie. The individual undergoing this process sits or lies in a quiet room accompanied by a friend or professional therapist who acts as auditor. The auditor directs attention of the patient to the patient's self and begins to place the patient in various periods of the patient's life merely by telling him to go there rather than remember. That sounds an awful lot like hypnosis to me. So it's hard for me to say stuff definitively about this, but there's something that I believe that I don't know if it's ever been studied or proved or not, but my experience leads me to believe it's true. I think there are certain practices that people engage in that create mental states which are very similar. And things that I'm talking about, the four examples that pop most easily to mind are this: Dianetics auditing, Number 2, hypnosis. Number 3, meditation. Number 4, prayer. And number 5, flow states. Now, if you don't know what a flow state is, that's basically when you're in the zone. Like you're doing something, you're not really thinking that hard. Everything is just coming easily. Everything flows. You're in a flow state. Now, the fact that he emphasizes the fact that there's no hypnosis involved here, and he said that twice so far, and I suspect it'll come up again later on in the book, but it seems a little too protesty. It seems like, hey, it's not hypnosis. We're going to put you in this thing called a reverie, but it's not hypnosis. We're going to ask you to visit parts of your life, but it's not hypnosis. No, make of that what you will. No hypnotism or other means are used. So there's your second disclaimer. In a clear, full memory exists. It says fill, but I think that's a typo. I think it's supposed to be full. In a clear, full memory exists throughout the lifetime, with additional bonus that he has photographic recall in color, motion, sound, etc., as well as optimum computational ability. So, if you become clear, you will remember everything in perfect detail. You will suddenly be in possession of an eidetic memory that would put Sheldon Cooper to shame. And you will also have optimum computational ability. So presumably you'll be really, really good at math and other things that require synthesis. The Dianetic clear is to a current normal individual as the current normal is to the severely insane. So, imagine a person who has really bad schizophrenia, let's say. Your mental state compared to that schizophrenic's mental state is roughly equivalent to the mental state of a clear to your mental state. The clear is that much more sane. This is a good one. That man was good, as established by exacting research, was no great surprise. Again, there was research to determine that man is good. I'm curious about that research. I'm very, very curious about how you quantify that. But that an unaberrated individual, which is to say a clear, was vigorously repelled by evil and yet gained enormous strength was astonishing, since aberration had been so long incorrectly supposed to be the root of strength and ambition, according to authorities since the time of Plato. I don't know where he's getting that since the time of Plato stuff. But the point is that not only is the clear good in the sense that humanity is good, but that the clear actually repels evil. That's interesting. An exact science does not believe, but establishes and proves facts. So I have yet to see any proof of anything here so far. But I don't disagree with that statement. I just disagree that what he's talking about in Dianetics is an exact science. And here he says, we are dealing here with an exact science. Precision axioms and new skills of application. By them, we gain a command over aberration and psychosomatic ills, and with them we take an evolutionary step in the development of man, which places him yet another stage above his distant cousins in the animal kingdom. So, with the application of Dianetics, we are taking an evolutionary step. We are no longer Homo sapiens. We are now, I don't know, Homo Dianeticus or something. And that is the end of the synopsis. And that is the end of part 1 of this series. So yeah, that is sort of the summary of what's going to be in this book. We've got the reactive mind, which is full of engrams, which encode trauma that goes back to conception. Using Dianetic auditing, you can clear these engrams, and when you do, you will recover all of your memories, and you will become super smart, and you will repel evil. Now, an interesting factoid about this is that early on, Hubbard kind of presented this stuff to actual psychologists, and they basically said, dude, you're full of shit. When the book came out, it was roundly panned by critics who said it was unscientific twaddle, but it was very, very much embraced by the public. It sold very well, and a lot of people became very interested in Dianetics. And so things began to take off. At some point, Hubbard did a presentation where he presented a woman who was supposedly clear and claimed that being clear, she would have total recall of everything, yada, yada, yada. Not only did she not have perfect recall of anything, she couldn't even remember what color tie Hubbard was wearing earlier, when she had seen him earlier in the presentation. So this presentation was a miserable failure, and this was a huge setback for Hubbard. But I think that's just a sort of interesting little tidbit there. He would claim later on that this woman wasn't really clear, that there was another guy that he presented later on as the first true clear. So just take that for what it's worth. But I thought this synopsis was really entertaining. And where I find it the most fascinating is sort of some of those passages that I pointed out, where you have claims that all of this stuff is super scientific and based on research, but none of the research is cited. Now, if we go into the text and he starts citing research, then we'll maybe take a look at some of that research. I don't know if we'll dive fully in, I don't know if we'll completely do the reference chasing thing, but we might look at one or two of these sources if we can find them and see if he is representing them accurately. So that's the end of part 1. Part 2 will cover maybe the introduction. I'm not sure if I'm going to cover the introduction or not. I don't think Hubbard wrote the introduction. I think someone else did. But we will definitely get into the first parts of the book proper. But I hope you've enjoyed this part, and I will see you in the next one. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Graham out. Bye.